Hello, this is Reading with Steven. I'm Steven. And as I said in the last video, today is going to be a very special episode of Bookshelf A to Z, series where I try to read all of my books from A to Z by author's last name. And it's a special episode because we're going to talk about multiple books at the same time, which I don't think strictly hasn't been done since the, whatever it's called, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But those were all in the same volume. These are 3 different volumes. Well, there's a secret 4th book. But the 3 main books we're talking about are Jason and the Argonauts by Apollonius of Rhodes, The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, and The Confessions of St. Augustine by St. Augustine. So, you might think these are 3 very different books. You know, two of them are ancient, one of them is pagan, one of them is contemporary dystopian science fiction. But I think there is an interesting through line between all 3 of these books, and that is the treatment of women and religion. And I think that will be our through line, because while we're not going to talk about any of the books in great detail, because we're getting through 3 of them, 3.5 of them, I do think it's important to have some sort of thematic overview. So, we'll get right to it, starting with Jason and the Argonauts. So the first book, Jason and the Argonauts by Apollonius of Rhodes, a 3rd century BCE epic poem, the 3rd century being the 200s, for those of you who have difficulties with that. I like to mention it because I know I do sometimes, so I figured you might as well. But it tells the story of Jason and the Argonauts on their way to get the Golden Fleece from the kingdom of Colchis, which is modern-day Georgia, the country, not the state. And they're, the hijinks that they do along the way. So one of the major themes, as I mentioned just a little bit ago, is the treatment of women in ancient Greek society, which is surprising, I think, because the ancient Greeks did not treat women well. Not in the mythology and not in reality. The women in what is this? Jason and the Argonauts are no different. They're often conniving, murdering, monstrosities, and interestingly enough, I think it has a very sympathetic view of them. The poem starts, it's in 4 parts, but the first 2 parts are from Jason's perspective. But once we get to the 3rd part, and the introduction of Medea, the poem actually switches from Jason to Medea as the main character, which is a big thing. There's no female main characters. There are a few in plays, but not in an epic poem. An epic poem, they don't have female main characters. So for this to have switched to that, kind of backdoored it in, if you will, I think is an interesting thing, and I think it speaks volumes to what Apollonius of Rhodes was trying to do, because while he does stick with the mythology and how poorly the women are treated, he does give them more sympathy than they normally would be given. The Argonauts. So the book begins with the Argonauts gathering together on the beaches of Iolcus, where they launch from. And they gather together. There are famous Argonauts. Jason, obviously, leader of the Argonauts. But there's also Heracles of Disney fame. Orpheus from Hadestown is one of them. Castor and Polydeuces are 2 of the members. Probably most famous from the breastplate of Maximus Decimus Meridius from Gladiator, who has the twin horses Castor and Pollux, which are their Latinized Roman names, on his breastplate. They leave. Many hijinks occurs, but the two most important thematically are when they first arrive at the island of Lemnos. And the island of Lemnos has no men on it because the women have killed all of the men on the island of Lemnos. They've killed all of them because the men were unfaithful. The unfaithfulness of the men is important to remember, because Jason and the Argonauts, they come to the island, and the women there decide, actually, we do kind of need men. Somebody's got to protect us from pirates and marauding armies, and it would be nice if we could have children still. So they invite Jason and the Argonauts to come with the understanding that they will be faithful. And Jason, in due course, promises that yes, they will be faithful, and they will be more than happy to come back to Lemnos. But first, they have to finish their quest, because in order to prove their faithfulness to the women of Lemnos, they have to be faithful to the quest that they have already agreed to do. The women of Lemnos are like, yeah, that makes sense. It makes complete sense. You go do your quest. Then when you come back, then we'll be happy together. Jason doesn't come back. Neither do any of the Argonauts, because they are a bunch of cads and they don't care. So they leave the women of Lemnos in the lurch. And this is foreshadowing for what will happen later outside of the play. Or outside of the poem. This is foreshadowing for Jason's character. He is a very flighty and unfaithful man. And we know this because the understanding is that we know Jason's story before reading the book. So the next episode is when they find the prophet Phineas. And the prophet Phineas has been cursed. He is cursed with the Harpies. The Harpies, half bird, half women, they come every day and they eat all of his food and they foul his home. And you might be starting to notice that there's a pattern, as I mentioned, of anti-female. Propaganda is probably overstating it, but an anti-female bias, if you will. A misogynistic bias where all women are bad and all the men are put upon by those women. All of the Argonauts, it is worth noting, are men. There was one woman who wanted to join, Atalanta, the famous archer, but when she tries to join, she is told, quote, she, Atalanta, had been pleased to meet him, Jason, and was eager to undertake the quest, but he decided against her in the end because he feared the ugly rivalries that lust provokes. So far in the poem, women are categorized as murderers. They murder their husbands and sons and fathers, or they are monsters who eat all of your food and make your home life awful, or they are objects of lust, not to be trusted around other men because they cause problems. They cause problems amongst men because men lust after them. But once we get to Colchis, things start to change. We go from the primarily male-focused Jason in the first two books, and now it changes over to Medea. Medea is the princess of Colchis, and also a famous sorceress. And she's referred to as a pharmacopoeia, so a pharmacist, because she makes spells and potions. So she's a pharmacopoeia. So if you know a pharmacist, there you go. Pharmacists are witches, according to the ancient Greeks. But the narrative changes from Jason to Medea, this sorceress, and we start to get a much different picture of women because now we are in her point of view. We start to see that she is being toyed with by the gods, forced to fall in love with Jason by Hera and Athena, who conspire with Aphrodite and Eros, better known as Cupid, to fall in love with Jason and to help him on his journey. And in doing so, she betrays her father and her kingdom and her countrymen. And it does not work out well for her. You know, she goes from having a fine position, a princess, to being a fugitive with these men. We can see her position after the Argonauts get the fleece from the king of Colchis, who was unwilling to give it to them. They have to steal it. After they get the fleece, they run away, and they take Medea with them because they promised to do so. But at one point, they consider just dropping her off and giving her up, and maybe that'll make the Colchians just stop chasing them. They'll get Medea, they'll stop chasing them. But Medea pleads with them, quote, "With a flood of tears she begged Arete, and then approached in turn her friends, the heroes. Because of you, O mightiest men of all, because of your affairs, I now am sunk in desperation. It was with my help you yoked the bulls and reaped the fatal crop of earth-born soldiers. Thanks to me, you shortly will sail away to bring the golden fleece back to Hymonia, and here I am, bereft of country, parents, home, and all life's pleasures, while I have restored to you your homes and homeland, and your honeyed eyes will gaze upon your parents. No, some grievous god has ripped those pleasures from me, and I am wandering the sea with strangers, a derelict. Beware your oaths and vows. Beware the fury who avenges suppliance. Beware the god's resentment when I tumble into Aeetes' hands and perish piecemeal under the unending agony and torture. There stand before me in defense no temples, no guardian towers, no battlements, but you, just you alone, men ruthless in their coldness, wretches who suffer not a hint of shame on seeing me, a helpless little girl, embrace the knees of an exotic queen. When you were burning to acquire the fleece, you would have rushed to join your spears in battle against the Colchians and proud Aeetes. Now you forget your courage, though these men are all alone and far from reinforcements." So she exclaimed, and every man she supplicated tried to hearten her and soothe her misery. They drew their swords and brandished their sharply whetted spears and swore that they would not hold back from saving her if she should meet with an unlucky judgment. So we see the place that Medea is in, that she's been put upon by helping Jason and his companions, that she is now left alone. They have promised to take care of her, and if they fail to take care of her, if they were to abandon her, she would die. She would be killed because she's alone. She has nobody else to help her. Now, they do eventually come around. They do help her out. And the poem ends with the Argonauts returning to Iolcus triumphant. But that's not where the story ends. The poem ends there, but the story continues because we know that Medea is infamous. Because Jason takes Medea as his wife, abandoning the Queen of Lemnos, I might add, but takes Medea as his wife, and then later on says, actually, I don't like you anymore. 10 years on, you're old. I don't really care for you anymore. And he divorces her and marries another person. Marries another young girl. And Medea, seeing this happen, says, no. I have sacrificed everything for you. So she kills Jason's children, her own children, and Jason's new wife, and flees to Asia Minor, just not Turkey, and starts a new race of people, I suppose, a new group of people, the Medians, and that's what we know happens to her and to Jason, because we know that Jason is unfaithful, and that unfaithfulness, our knowledge of who Medea is, plays throughout the novel or throughout the poem. And we know the dramatic irony of the fact that she is begging Jason to be faithful to her, and him agreeing to be faithful to her. Just like we know that Jason won't be faithful to the Lemnians. He won't be faithful to Medea either, because he is a lying scumbag, and that's what happens. Now, this is not to say that it's okay to kill your children. Don't do that. But that is the theme, that women are being mistreated and are being driven into this dire actions because of the way that men are treating them. And I think that's very fascinating. I think it's really interesting. I think it's really exciting. And I think I mentioned earlier that this is, to me at least, a proto-feminist book. And that's fascinating. I say proto-feminist because, again, because feminism wouldn't come around as an idea for like another 2,000 years. So to call it feminist is probably overstating it, but certainly proto-feminist. The idea that women have their own internal lives and they have their desires and wants and needs, that's feminist. That's feminism. And it's cool. Onwards to the next book. Okay, so here's where I would introduce the next book, except I don't have it. The next book is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, and it has the distinct fame, if you will, of being the first DNF of this project. The first did not finish of this Bookshelf A to Z project. Not because of the quality, not because of whether I liked it or not. I didn't really care for it, but that's a different story. But I did not finish it because I didn't like it. I did not finish it because tragedy struck. I was camping while I was reading that book. And it was a beautiful sunny day, and I was laying in the sun in the nice warmth. And I was reading, and I grew a little weary. And my dog was sitting next to me, and he was cuddling me, and we were both sleepy. So I was reading, and I put the book down, and I put it next to my head. So you imagine this? Me and him sleeping. And then a large man walked up to me and started talking. He scared my dog, and who stood up, very protective, stood next to my head, and got so excited he peed. Right next to my head. And most tragically, probably, is he peed right onto my copy of The Handmaid's Tale. And I'm willing to do a lot of things, but I am not going to read a urine-soaked book. So, sadly, I only got about halfway through the book before that happened, before that tragedy struck. And I don't have it anymore. I threw it out. I'm sorry. But for those of you who are unaware of what The Handmaid's Tale is, I will tell you what I do know about it and what I think about it. Insofar as what I had read and what I have gleaned from the synopsis online. Because I'm not going to buy a new copy of it. I'm sorry. It's not going to happen. I didn't really care for it, and it kind of defeats the purpose of the Bookshelf A to Z. If I'm buying books, I guess I could go to the library. No, I'm not going to go to the library, because the library, I'm still angry about the library charging me full price for a used book. So we're not going to go to the library. But we are going to talk about the book. Handmaid's Tale is a dystopian novel, which I guess technically means it's a science fiction novel. All dystopian novels are science fiction-y. Although this isn't really a science fiction book in any way, shape, or form. It's more of a political dystopia exclusively. There's no like fantastic technologies that I noticed. But it is a dystopian novel in which a Christo-fascist coup takes place in the United States, overthrows the government, and institutes, as I said, a Christo-fascist dictatorship in which women are relegated to subservient, entirely, completely subservient role, where they are not really allowed outside of the house at all. And because of a crisis in a birth rate crisis, not most women are infertile. So the women that are fertile are used as breeding stock to be raped by the men in charge. You can watch the show on Hulu, or don't. Hulu is actually kind of in trouble, so probably don't watch the show on Hulu. I don't know. Do whatever you want. I've never watched the show on Hulu, but that's because I don't like dystopian stuff. Not because of its quality. By all accounts, it's supposed to be pretty good, and at least the first season is supposed to be fairly faithful. So, do what you will with that. The story follows Offred, who is one of those women who are called handmaids, and they are trained and disciplined into. They are not supposed to talk to men. They are just kind of to do their duties. Their whole purpose in life is to get pregnant. That's it. We see certain glimpses of what happened before the coup overtook the United States. We see that everything was kind of normal-ish until all of a sudden it stopped being normal. I don't have a lot to say. I can't even bring up any quotes because I don't even have my copy anymore. So it's very sad. I don't really care for dystopian fiction, so it wasn't my cup of tea. But I know a lot of women do find it very powerful, very moving. I know Margaret Atwood is a very formidable writer, and she has won the Booker Prize twice now, I believe. The Booker Prize for the best novel written in English, in the English language, in the world. So formidable writer. It was very interestingly written. It's very choppily written, which I thought was, it lended itself well to the depressive atmosphere. But overall, I wasn't able to read it, so I couldn't finish it. But I did want to mention it, because I was reading it, I was thinking about it, I did have some notes on it, and I didn't want those to go to waste. And this seemed like a perfect opportunity, in this quick run through, to talk about it. And I think that it is thematically linked to the proto-feminism of Jason and the Argonauts, and the religious nature of our next book, which is the Confessions of St. Augustine. The Confessions of St. Augustine. How to talk about this book. This is obviously an autobiographical work, although after we talked about I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, maybe it's better to refer to it less as an autobiography, more as a memoir, since it does start at the beginning and go to the point at which it was written. But it does skip a lot, because the whole purpose of this book is to show the religious conversion of Augustine to Christianity. He was raised in Africa, moved to Italy, was a Manichaean, which is an Eastern mystery faith. Used to be a world religion. You can see Manichaean temples and statues and whatnot, so as far east as China, and as far west as, obviously, Rome. So it was a fascinating religion, but it has more or less disappeared now. And then finally his conversion to Catholicism. Well, Christianity. What we now today would refer to as the Catholic Church. What they referred to as just regular Christianity, because there were not, a massive amount of Christian doctrines to believe in. Everyone was Catholic. And not necessarily in our idea of Catholicism, because their idea of Catholicism also included what would later become Eastern Orthodoxy and Nestorian Christianity as well. Obviously, those are different branches of the religion now, but I digress, because I'm a nerd. I like religion. I like talking about religion. It's fun. But I did not personally care for this book. I finished it. Did not personally care for it. It's very religious. He has a very long-winded way of writing. The opening I think is a great example of the writing. I'll read the first paragraph to you, and just note that this is how he writes throughout the entire thing. This does not change. You are great, Lord, and greatly to be praised. Great is your power, and infinite is your wisdom, and man desires to praise you, for he is a part of your creation. He bears his mortality about with him, and carries the evidence of his sin and the proof that you resist the proud. Still he desires to praise you, this man who is only a small part of your creation. You have prompted him, that he should delight to praise you, for you have made us for yourself, and restless is our heart until it comes to rest in you. Grant me, Lord, to know and understand whether first to invoke you or to praise you, whether first to know you or call upon you. But who can invoke you, knowing you not? For who knows you not may invoke you as another than you are. It may be that we should invoke you in order that we may come to know you. But how shall we call on him in whom they have not believed? Or how shall they believe without a preacher? Now they shall praise the Lord who seek him, for those who seek shall find him, and finding him shall praise him. I will seek you, Lord, and call upon you. I call upon you, Lord, in my faith, which you have given me, which you have inspired in me through the humanity of your Son, and through the ministry of your preacher. My God. The way he writes is very flowy. There's a lot of there's a lot of clauses and dependent clauses on clauses on clauses on clauses. There are it's a lot, and it is a very difficult thing to read. I will grant you. Anybody who has tried to read it will know that it's a difficult read. It's also a somewhat famous read. St. Augustine, doctor of the church, early church father, came up with the idea, helped to propagate the idea of baptism as the baptism of babies, and ideas foundational to Christianity. That's not in this book, but it is important to note that he was a highly educated person. He was a well-respected teacher in Italy, in Rome, because this is during the Roman Empire. This is the 4th century AD, so the 300s. For those of you who have issues with that. So this is the 300s. So he is highly, highly educated. And when he writes, it's very complicated. And that's not necessarily a problem. There will be other books like this. It's just that it is complicated in a very out of fashion way. You know, people are. I don't think people today are used to reading these kinds of books, and I certainly am not. This is a long-winded way of writing. Even if you were to write in an academic standard, this would be a very difficult way to write. And I don't think that's necessarily a problem. It's the man's style is the man's style. He's writing 1,700 years ago. You can't really complain about the way he writes. Additionally, of course, it is also translated, so possibly it is a translation issue. Who knows? I don't speak Latin. I didn't read the original. I don't read it in the original. But he is writing in a highly religious manner, in a manner that I think today we might conclude is very similar to the Christo-fascists of The Handmaid's Tale. And if you were to make that conclusion, you would be sorely wrong, incredibly wrong, because the Christo-fascists are obviously not based off of Catholic Christianity, despite what Margaret Atwood might say. The things that happened in The Handmaid's Tale are not really realistic. Well, they're realistic in the sense that they happened, but they did not all happen at the same time, really. But Augustine does not have those same views. He does not have the same views that women are unthinking creatures. Certainly, I would argue that the ancient Greeks... I can't reach my book. It's over there. But the ancient Greeks had a much worse view than Augustine did. Because I think it's worth noting that early Christianity was actually a great leveler. While women were never treated, fully equal, the way we would want today, they were treated more equally by the early Christians because they needed people. They were trying to convert people so that they would continue to be Christians. Monica, Augustine's mother, is a great example of this. Monica is a very smart and intelligent woman. She is very well respected, and her words and actions are well respected within her community. This is something that does not take place at all in The Handmaid's Tale. We can see it with the I forget their names. Fred, Offred's owner, rapist, I guess. His official wife used to be a television personality, but no longer is allowed to do that. This stands in stark contrast to Monica, who does preach, who does do acts of charity outside of the home, and is noted for her intelligence by Augustine himself. And he speaks highly of her he spends nearly a whole chapter of the Confessions just talking about her death and the effect it had on him and on the community, and what happened there. This is a woman that Augustine loved greatly. Now, I know it's his mother. Of course, all people love their mothers, but I do think it's interesting that he does not love her just as a mother, but as an intellectual being. Quote, "As the day now approached on which she, Monica, was to depart this life, a day which you knew, but which we did not, it happened, though I believe it was by your secret ways arranged, that she and I stood alone, leaning in a certain window from which the garden of the house we occupied at Ostia could be seen. Here, in this place, removed from the crowd, we were resting ourselves for the voyage after the fatigues of a long journey. We were conversing alone very pleasantly, and forgetting those things which are past, and reaching forward toward those things which are future. We were in the present, and in the presence of truth, which you are, discussing together what is the nature of the eternal life of the saints, which eye has not seen, nor ear heard, neither has entered into the heart of man. We opened wide the mouth of our heart, thirsting for those supernal streams of your fountain, the fountain of life which is with you, so that we might be sprinkled with its water according to our capacity, and might in some measure weigh the truth of so profound a mystery. And when our conversation had brought us to the point where the very highest of physical sense and the most intense illumination of physical light seemed, in comparison with the sweetness of that life to come, not worthy of comparison, nor even of mention, we lifted ourselves with a more ardent love towards the self-same, and we gradually passed through all the levels of bodily objects, and even through the heaven itself, where the sun and moon and stars shine on the earth. Indeed, we soared higher yet by an inner musing, speaking and marveling at your works. And we came at last to our own minds, and went beyond them, in order that we might climb as high as that region of unfailing plenty where you feed Israel forever with the food of truth, where life is that wisdom by whom all things are made, both which have been, and which are to be. Wisdom is not made, but is as it has been and forever shall be, for to have been and to be hereafter do not apply to it, but only to be, because it is eternal, and to have been and to be hereafter are not eternal. And while we were thus speaking and straining after it, we just barely touched it with the whole effort of our hearts. Then, with a sigh, leaving the first fruits of the Spirit bound to that ecstasy, we returned to the sounds of our own tongue, where the spoken word had been both beginning and end. But what is like to your word, our Lord, which remains in itself without becoming old, and makes all new things new? Now, I know that's a lot to take in. It's a lot to understand. I think it'd be easy to read into a somewhat erotic nature to the idea of two people coming together. But it's important, I think, to contextualize what Augustine is saying and the ideas that Augustine is espousing. Because Augustine, obviously, very well educated, we see that Monica and Augustine are able to do that. He does not agree that women are lesser beings incapable of understanding. He believes that they are fully capable, that they are fully the equal of men intellectually, and they are capable of understanding God, and thus understanding all things, as he says. Well, as equally understanding, I guess I should say. Nobody, according to Augustine, is able to understand God, but he's able to, as he says, touch upon the truth. And I think that's a very powerful thing. I think that's a very powerful statement, and certainly one that would not exist in The Handmaid's Tale. And I think, because I think one of my problems with The Handmaid's Tale, other than my general dislike of dystopia in general, is that I think The Handmaid's Tale is too quaint. It's too easy of an out to say that religion is the oppressive force. I think is too easy. It's very Marxian, actually. Marx, religion is the opiate of the masses. Atwood would seemingly say, and I don't want to put words into her mouth, she is still alive. Atwood would seemingly say that religion is not the opiate of the masses, religion is the scourge of the masses, or at least of women. And I think that's too easy, because religion is not, as we see it in Augustine, religion is not the scourge of the masses. It can also alleviate the pain. It can alleviate the problems that, the downtrodden have in society. But I would agree with Atwood in saying that religion can also be turned, can be changed, and be used as an oppressive force. After all, in Little Women, we see that Alcott writes about, obviously, they're very devout Christians, and they're very good people. They believe in, they are against slavery. They are pro equal rights amongst blacks and whites, and certainly amongst women and men. And yet, we must remember that at the same time, that same Christianity is used in the Confederacy to promote slavery, to promote racism and white supremacy and patriarchy. And so I think it's more complicated than what Atwood says, which is why I don't care in particular for The Handmaid's Tale. Based on what I read, it could be different. I don't know. I hope it's not, because that would be very silly of me to have said. But if it isn't, and I don't think it is, then I think it's important to remember that religion is merely a tool to be wielded. It is not bad or good. It simply is. And we can see, you can see it in Jason and the Argonauts, not a particularly religious book, although it does discuss ancient polytheistic religion, but the misogyny is not rooted in Christianity, obviously. They weren't Christian. They were polytheists. And yet they're still misogynistic. And I think it's important to remember that. And that's all I'm saying. But that's why I think that Augustine is an interesting book. Again, I don't really like it, but I can see the interesting parts of it. At least in our theme, the theme of the video, which is feminism and the treatment of women. Must always have a theme. And that's that. Alright, for the secret fourth book. A book that I don't really want to talk about. And doesn't really fit the themes of Bookshelf A to Z. I just thought it was really good to read because I owned it. And I've read it before in college. And that is Eichmann in Jerusalem, A Report on the Banality of Evil by Hannah Arendt. This is a difficult book. Obviously, it's not fiction, so it doesn't, strictly speaking, fall into the Bookshelf A to Z discussion. But it is an important book. And I think if you are yourself interested in history or ethics or law or anything to that effect, I think this is an incredibly important book because it deals with the trial of Adolf Eichmann, who was a high-ranking Nazi during the Holocaust. He was in charge of the train system. He was first put in charge of the deportation of Jews out of Germany and then out of the German occupied territories. And eventually he was put in charge of the deportation of Jewish people and other undesirables, homosexuals, transsexuals, Romani, communists, whoever, all the people that the Nazis were killing, rounding up and killing. He was put in charge of transporting them to the prison and death camps. What's interesting about Hannah Arendt, and I'm not going to talk. So the problem with this book is that this is an important topic, and it's a major theme in the book itself, is how important the Holocaust is, how important it is to get the facts right about genocide and about the Holocaust. In particular, it was this book is about, but I think Hannah Arendt would be very clear that it is genocide in general that is very important, but it's how important it is to get that right. And I don't feel capable, at least not at this time, of doing that, of being able to really do that. She talks about in the trial how the Israeli trial is kind of shit because they overstep themselves when talking about Eichmann. The Israeli trial tries to say that Eichmann committed the Holocaust, and she has to go in and be like, no, they didn't. No, he did not. He is guilty of crimes, but he is not guilty of all of the crimes. And we need to get that right. And that is the same feeling that I have when talking about Eichmann in Jerusalem, which is that I am not capable of doing that. So it is only a half read. I mean, I read the full thing, and I think you should read the full thing, but I am not going to talk at length about it. But I do think it's important to talk at length because I think more people should read it. It is an incredibly important book because, again, especially in modern times, this is a book that talks about how to do journalism. Hannah Arendt was originally a journalist. She was writing about this for the New Yorker, which is an American magazine, and she turned those New Yorker articles into this book. But again, for the discussions about ethics and law and how to treat human rights violators, this is probably the most important book that you can read. It's laid out very well, and maybe one day I will make a video about it. In fact, I would like to make a video about it, but at this time I don't think I'm capable of doing so. Not with my abilities to make videos, not with my abilities to make scripts or edit or any of that. Because while I am getting better, I am not there yet. I'm not good enough yet to handle a topic like that. But I do want to make it clear, while we're in the A's, I did want to bring it up because I do think you should read it. And you should talk about it and understand it. As far as conclusions go, this has been... I kind of use this as a way to catch up on my reading, to get through, again, 3.5 books, if you will, to catch up to where I am when it comes to the actual reading of these books. The next couple books will be... Well, the next video will be on Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. I love Jane Austen. And the next 5 videos will be about Jane Austen because I love Jane Austen. I love talking about Jane Austen, and it's my channel, so I get to talk about Jane Austen for 5 videos. I'm gonna take that opportunity. What else? Is there anything else? I don't think so. If you have any thoughts, feelings, concerns, don't leave your concerns. But if you have any thoughts and feelings, please leave a comment. I love comments. I love talking about books. It is the highlight of my month every time somebody leaves a comment. I do genuinely love comments. I love talking about books, and I love it when people talk about books with me. And other than that, I wish you well, and I hope you subscribe to the channel if you want to keep up with this project. Read Jane Austen if you want to participate more fully. And then, go off in peace and continue reading. Thank you. This is Reading with Stephen. I'm Stephen again. I appreciate it. Goodbye.